Hey folks, welcome to the follow-up to the Astrologer's Challenge for 2018, posted in December. So our challenge today was by looking at charts without any other information to bias our assessment of this chart. Can we actually determine if someone is potentially a rapist or a rape victim or a murderer? So there's a lot of conversation, most of it poorly informed and not based on anything in actual practice, clinical practices, or even solid statistical evidence. About, it's supposedly if you have this or that in a chart, like you can tell something, because Mars and Venus is kind of rapey, and ooh, Pluto, drama, horrible criminal behavior. Ooh. Um, so here's the thing, right? So these statements wouldn't exist if there wasn't some truth it was founded on. The problem is the truth that it's founded on is taken out of context, and uh, a lot of information is missing. So a lot of it is misused information. And the problem is when we, as quote unquote astrologers, whether we're just practicing or professionals, anybody in that spectrum who's an astrology aficionado compared to the average layperson who knows nothing about astrology, when we start jacking our jaws, but oh yeah, well, you clearly have like a Venus, Pluto, Mars, quintupled, octagon. Obviously, you've got rape tendencies, or you are a sociopath who could kill people. Like, you're not doing anybody any favors, nor are you doing the study of astrology any favors. And the fact of the matter is, you're probably wrong. So not only have you done a lot of disservice to yourself and the people around you in your astrological community and the science that you love so much, here's the problem. Here's the real problem. And this is where I have an issue. You're doing a huge disservice to an innocent person who's now being tarred and feathered with a brush they didn't even earn, because you don't know that to be true. And when you start making psychological predictive analysis about somebody in those terms, you become like the thought police, catching people committing crimes before they happen. And that's not true. Anybody who knows anything about sociology and criminal psychology, all that sort of stuff, it's just not that simple. So here's the thing. When we look at astrology and we say, can we or can we not tell if these things will likely present in someone's life? What we're really saying, here's a mind blower for you. What we're really saying is who we are, is this a matter of nature versus nurture? Am I who I am because I am predestined to be this way and I had no choice and no way to avoid who I would become because it's who I am? It was designed by nature. It's in my chart. Or is it nurture? Am I who I am because of my environment and the opportunities I was given or not given and the experiences that I have had to endure that were either traumatic or supportive? Am I who I am because I'm a product of my circumstances, which as a young person who is developing into a whole adult, you don't have any control over. Now, obviously, the best answer is it's a mix of both. It's 50-50. But there are those cases where we have, quote unquote, the bad seed, where some people just seem to come out of the womb mean and evil and sociopathic and just not right on so many levels. We don't necessarily have really solid, consistent, reliable explanations for this. No more than having solid, consistent, reliable information about why some people come out of the womb and know from a very young age that what they're driven to do is to become saints, and to eschew the material world and, live a life of aesthetic poverty in service and charity to other people. Mother Teresa made a choice, and it's a very rare choice because the rest of us are certainly not clamoring to join a nunnery and live in poverty, on our moral principles for the rest of our life. Just like many of us are not choosing to become, serial killers or, the rapists or, drug dealers or pick something, right? All right, so that's how we're starting this. So when we do these exercises, I want you to understand this is not about being right or wrong. This is about learning to think correctly when we look at a chart, and more importantly, when we're addressing a chart of a human being. All right, we have to understand that we don't know everything, and one of the things we're going to examine is where a chart can be misleading and fall short of our expectations, and what it's actually telling us, and how that information is being misinterpreted. And also, it's going to give us an opportunity to really examine our biases, and where we would be tempted to make a chart fit our expectations from what we know about the person, which is why we don't have any information here except the chart information. So let's look at a few things, right, before I tell you which one is which. All right, so if we're going to start over here, in this chart, the first thing you're going to notice, and this is obvious to everybody, right, so it's kind of a giveaway, is we've got a Sun-Pluto square. All right, now the Sun-Pluto square, anytime Pluto shows up in a chart, it's always trauma, drama, past life, suffering, yada, 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 like you name the horrific thing and it's there because, Pluto, right? Pluto also gives us a lot of other things that allow us to go through experiences and come out the other side. So one of the things that you'll see a lot with Sun-Pluto, hard Sun-Pluto aspects, specifically the hard ones, right? Squares, oppositions, conjunctions, is that when you have, and this is mostly with all of the planets chart, but certainly with the Sun-Pluto, when you have Sun-Pluto hard aspects, the will to survive is exaggerated. It is amplified. These are people who will go through absolute hell. Like, their lives will be personal living war zones in many instances, not necessarily all of them, because this is a training ground or a strength training exercise for them to realize and become who they are, which are incredibly emotionally resilient, powerful people. Not everybody makes it through that process. Some people will break, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually in the process, but that is their work in this lifetime, is to test the levels of their endurance and their ability to rise above anything that's been handed to them. So you might find this in people who become mega moguls, who rise from the ashes and just like change the world with their unique vision, because they're so single-mindedly fixed on something, and they have the superhuman endurance of a god, to make things happen. These are people who move mountains to accomplish a mission. You will also find these types of aspects in people who endure unutterable hell that we wouldn't wish on anybody. The stuff Lifetime movies are made out of, right? Big dramas. Who, because of the Pluto didn't make them go through these experiences. The thing to remember is that Pluto did not create these experiences for them to go through. Pluto allowed them to survive these experiences, and that's the difference. So you can have people who've all gone through horrid, horrible, nightmarish circumstances. Not all of them are going to survive, but the ones who do survive, and who are upright and in ownership of themselves, no matter what level of dysfunction they may have ended up in the process, you're going to find that Pluto is what allows them to survive unbelievable circumstances that the rest of us would never have to go through. So that's why you will always see Pluto in the charts of people who've gone through some amazing stuff you would never want to go through on your own. Okay, it's not because Pluto creates those circumstances. It's because Pluto gives them the resolve and the will and the ability to endure and suffer more than other people and come through it intact as best you can be on the other side. So Pluto gives you the ability to survive those things. It doesn't create situations. It gives you the ability to survive and tell a tale later. Now, the other thing with this chart that's also interesting, right, and kind of a telltale. So now remember, we don't actually know what time this person was born, or maybe because we don't really have the time here. So we're going to say that the moon is 23, give or take a few degrees. And even with that latitude, right, back and forth, look at this. That moon is still opposing Saturn Uranus. So again, more outer planet stuff, more trauma, drama, horrors. Oh my God! Stuff going on in this chart, because it's a very personal planet, the moon, and it's involving Saturn and Uranus in Sagittarius, which are both Saturn and Uranus are cold, hard planets. in their expression, and Sagittarius is a masculine fire sign. Sagittarius by nature is a lot of fun, but it is still a masculine fire sign. So this creates a level of insensitivity. Um, Together, it creates a level of insensitivity that's pretty remarkable. So now, on the surface, we could look at this and say, wow, that moon in Gemini opposed Saturn, Uranus. Boy, this person's a jerk, or geez, how insensitive could they be? Because remember, Moon in Gemini is not given to sentiment either. The whole weepy willow thing's not their thing. Um, and all of those things would be true. But the thing about it is this Moon Saturn Uranus opposition also creates a level of emotional armor that will allow this person to get through situations without being emotionally invested too deeply. So on the one hand, we can see issues with someone having difficulty connecting on a more emotional level with people, like the whole weeping willow and don't leave me, like oh my god. They don't do well with weak, needy partners. That will make them like drive them up tree. So we may see that as an inability to maintain deeper, more sensitive types of emotionally expressive relationships. Or we could see this as somebody who's just a hard ass. Like literally, they're just insensitive. They're selfish because Saturn and Uranus and the moon together like this, it's very much about what they need to get done in the immediate sense. Um, and a whole lot of other not so pleasant things. So the Moon Saturn Uranus combination here does not describe a light, fluffy personality or a weeping willow and kind of like, oh my God. And that can be challenging. So somebody might look at that and see all the negative stuff. And here's a pro tip for you. Anytime you make a negative prediction about anything, whether you're an astrologer or a normal person, you're usually right, because this is why people are always so quick to say, oh, that'll never work, because you're right. 99% of life is failing at things, or expressing it awkwardly or poorly. It happens. The pursuit of excellence and perfection is what drives us, and it doesn't happen often. So the 99 times you say something negative or something's not going to work, you're probably going to be right. But that's not the truth. That's just an observation of what we typically expect and consistently find to happen. That doesn't mean that it's the absolute truth, or that it is a culmination of truth. So here again with Moon, Saturn, Uranus, it's a difficult aspect, and if you made all sorts of negative associations with this combination of planets, you'd be right. You would certainly see those expressions, but you have to get underneath that because the outer planet is involved, and ultimately, when you have outer planets involved with personal planets like this, right? So we've got that Sun, Pluto. Here we go. Right? And this Moon Uranus, when you've got outer planets mixed up with inner planets, what this also means is that one, everything you do is going to be high profile, visible. It's not that you don't get away with anything, it's just that everything you do is given a spotlight. So you're less likely to be able to slide through without people noticing, because everything you do is like amplified, right? Whereas other people will do the same thing and get away with it, but because nobody ever calls them on it, they feel like they're not doing anything wrong. We know these people, right? So the other thing is these are transpersonal planets involved with personal planets. So there's something about your experiences in this life and how you respond to them and how you get through them and what they represent and who you represent and what you symbolize that's going to be very important for other people. And you don't get to choose that. So you don't get to say, oh, well, I think I'd like to be a rock star. I want to be, oh my God, who is this lovely girl? Oh God, I can't remember her name, and I love her, Taylor Swift. I'd like to be Taylor Swift. No, you don't get to choose it. All you get to choose in life is how you respond to situations and how you're going to let these situations and experiences keep you stuck or drive you forward. That's all you get. What this represents and symbolizes to other people, we have no control over. You have zero control over what other people want to believe you are. So, I mean, you can influence it as best you can, but at the end of the day, the work you got to do is on yourself, not on other people's opinions. So, that's this chart. So right off the bat, we're looking at somebody who's really hard, like emotionally hard and psychologically incredibly powerful, who's probably going to have gone through situations because of Pluto and the Saturn Uranus opposing the moon, where they feel very isolated and alone. And for someone to still be alive and not locked up in a loony bin right now with that type of thing is a lifelong string of experiences or themes also indicates somebody who's been through a lot of experiences that would break other people. So we don't develop that emotional reserve and ability to handle being isolated or abandoned or alone or whatever these things are, where you're constantly in the 11th hour left to your own devices to figure it out because nobody's coming to help you and nobody's rescuing you. This is what we see with these particular type planets, and this is how they come into existence, and this is why this person is able to survive these things. So all those action movies that we love to watch, where the hero in the 11th hour is like, oh my, their back's against the wall, and oh no, there's no one to save them, there's no one to help them, they've got to figure this out on their own. Now what are they going to do? Because they're going to die any second. And then they figure something out, or they get a lucky break and they take advantage of it, right? This is what we see a lot of when we see these types of aspects in a person's chart. And remember, in those stories, the hero doesn't mean anything to us personally if we don't know them, whether they're real or a fictional character. You know, they're certainly not paying our bills or coming home to us at night. But what they represent to us and what they symbolize is everything. So their response to those horrid situations that they find themselves in that has us literally on the edge of our seats, how they respond to that and get through it, that is what matters to us. And that's where those outer planets with personal planets come in. Now, if we go to this chart, right? Now, here's what's interesting about this chart. Do you see any hard aspects? Do you see any squares, any oppositions? We see some conjunctions, but conjunctions are neutral, so they can be good or bad depending on what's involved, right? So here, what's remarkable about this particular chart is the absence of hard aspects, right? The closest thing we have to a hard aspect in this chart, and I wouldn't even use it, right, are out of sign quincunxes with the Sun and Venus, right? And again, the moon, give or take a few degrees back or forth. So we've got one. We've got a Moon Mars conjunction in Libra, and then of course the Moon Mars is there a quincunx? Yeah. So we don't even have that. Literally, the only hard aspect we have is right here, a conjunction of the Moon and Mars in Libra, right, which is a classic diplomat sign, you know, blood-free hands. And the only other thing we can find is this minor aspect, which is a quincunx, and it's an out-of-sign quincunx, no less, which weakens it even more, or hides it even more, with the Sun and Venus to that Pluto, right? So these are not describing anything compelling about this person, right? If anything, what we're seeing here with that Moon-Mars conjunction, we're going to see somebody who's probably very pushy in terms of having their own needs met. Moon and Mars together will make somebody a lot more self-serving, right? So it's very much about what they need first. And in Libra, they make it look like it was your idea, or they make you feel guilty if you don't do it their way. Like they're very manipulative. Well, I use the word manipulate, but they're very good at forcefully persuading you to do what they want you to do for them. So it's a weird position, that Moon-Mars thing. And ultimately what we want is that to be hooked up more positively in a chart, so it's doing some good stuff, right? So here's the thing, like this particular hard aspect here, right? So it makes sextiles. Makes sextiles to that Sun, Venus, Mercury stellium. It makes a sextile to Jupiter and Saturn. So it's doing good stuff in the chart. So we would expect this person to be charming, pleasant even, right? This is not somebody who would draw a lot of antipathy from us. And the other thing is, when we talk about charm, look at this, right? So we've got this as well. We've got a Sun, Venus, Mercury conjunction in Leo, which tends to make someone very charming and very loving, the center of attention. So they're going to be very comfortable with putting themselves out there and entertaining and, you know, making other people feel lovely because they're performers, right? And it's trining Jupiter and Sagittarius, which typically has a very good sense of humor. That trine in the fire signs always makes somebody very fun to be around. And because this Moon Mars, this pushy Moon Mars in the manipulative sign of Libra is sextile, both of them. So we've got somebody whose way of getting through life works for them, right? So this is somebody who's very, very good at getting what they want and need from people, and usually without a lot of resistance. So now here's the thing I want to say, right? So remember we talked about how these outer planets and what you've been through and what you've experienced, and who you represent and what you symbolize, your experiences symbolize, becomes important for other people. No matter how it is for you, your reactions and responses to these things and how you get through them becomes a social thing. It becomes very important for the world at large. There's something about your experiences and who you represent that becomes a symbol for other people. So everything you do is spotlighted. Like there's just no, you don't get a free pass on anything. Literally, you could be standing next to somebody else. You're both stealing a skateboard, and you're literally at the same time in front of the person, and he will see both of you doing it. But with outer planet contacts like this, because of what this represents in a lifetime, you're going to be the one that's going to get hung out to dry as the what is it, the example for other people, right? So with that said, let's go over here, right? Let's look for the outer planets in this chart. So we know we've got Uranus and Neptune here, we've got Pluto here, right? So question, are there any hard aspects to these outer planets, right? Well, remember, there's no hard aspects here, okay? Because the only thing this does is a sextile to Saturn. Okay, and the only other thing we have is this wide out of sign inconjunct or quincunx to Pluto. So, all right, maybe that Pluto is going to make some factor into the lifetime, but again, it's a quincunx, right? So this is a quincunx, which makes it a little weaker and not nearly as compelling as the other chart. The other thing too, remember, this sextiles both ends of this quincunx, right? So this would indicate to us, let me get rid of some other stuff. This would indicate to us that this is somebody who possibly could have an impact on the world, but mostly is going to go through unnoticed and largely unchallenged. Because remember, outer planets and hard aspects are about challenging, being challenged by life and circumstances. So there's going to be a deficit of challenges in terms of their experiences. So they're going to have a relatively easy life. So here's the thing I want to mention about that, right? So, and older people get it, like looking backward on life, like it makes sense, okay? So people who have very easy lives, like, life makes sense, everything rolls, everything runs on time, people do what they're supposed to do, you do the whole normal, good citizen thing that you're supposed to do. These people generally have very sheltered or insulated lives because they can, and there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is, in order for you to psychologically or emotionally develop strength or power, you must have resistance and pushback and challenge. You cannot get strong lifting a weight that does not require a tremendous amount of exertion and effort on your part and could potentially hurt you if you're not careful with it. So having a soft, easy life does not make you a stronger, more dynamic, more charismatic, or even more empathic person. It just means that you'd had a really easy life, and it's very easy to forget how uh, difficult and painful and challenging life is for other people. So in this chart, this is somebody who's going to have an easy life. There's not going to be a lot of circumstances or opportunities for them to develop themselves unless they consciously and voluntarily pursue those things. Um, and even then, with this chart setup, this is not looking like somebody who would necessarily go out of their way to do all of that because they're having a good time. Who on earth is going to disrupt their good time to go out and suffer? Nobody. I wouldn't. So, looking at this first question, which one is the rapist and which one is the victim? So, I'm going to tell you who's who in a second. The next question is, which one of these is the murderer? Or a murderer, I should say. So again, when you're looking at murder, right? Murder is an extremely violent act. It is like one of the uh, top 10 things you don't do according to God, right? It's on the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not kill, because it's a big, big deal. So for someone to be pushed to that point, they're making spiritual transgress at that level for whatever reason, whether it's self-defense or they're a serial killer and there's something wrong with them or whatever, even if it's just an accident, just a circumstantial bad luck accident that they happen to be, I don't know, driving a car when they accidentally, run over somebody. It's never a pleasant thing. And it hurts us, unless we're psychopaths, but that's a whole other conversation. So looking at these charts, who do you think is more capable of committing murder under any circumstance, or more likely to commit murder? Because this was a deliberate thing. This was not an accident, right? And again, when you look at these charts, I want you to pause it right here, and I want you to think to yourself, if I'm looking at these charts, how easy would it be for me to believe that this chart versus that chart is this person? Right, is the rapist or the victim or the murderer. How easy it is for me to believe this one versus that one. And are we even sure that one of these is any of those things? Right? Because this looks pretty sweet, right? Pretty sweet. Like this, there's nothing in here showing us that there's anything to indicate that, this person might be a rapist or a victim of rape or a murderer, right? So pause for a second and come back and you can finish the video with me. All right, so here we go. These are the charts we've been looking at. So the chart on the left is the chart of Cyntoia Brown. She is the one who's been in the news recently. She is the girl who is the rape victim, and she also has been convicted of murder as a matter of self-defense. The person on the right is Brock Turner. He is a rapist. And had he not been caught, like most rapists, he would have been a serial rapist. Now, understand that when we talk about rape, we're not talking about boogeymen jumping out of the bushes kind of rape. Like, it's not like that. Serial rapist means that you, like a potato chip, you don't stop at just one. Because you got away with it, you keep doing it over and over and over again. This is a pattern that we see a lot in date rapes. Certainly with serial rapists that are, jumping on people around them, but the majority of rapes that we know of are committed by people that the victim knows. These are not strangers jumping out of bushes. The majority of rapes are occurring by people the person's familiar with, because weak predators don't attack unknown targets. They familiarize themselves with the herd or the group that they're dealing with, and they target the weakest member. And you can't do that unless you know for sure who the weakest member of a group is. So that's why rape victims the majority of them are familiar with, or at some level with, who their rapist is. It's not a complete stranger jumping out of the bush. So, and this is Brock Turner. Now, here's what's interesting about these two. So remember, with Cyntoia Brown, we talked a lot about these outer planets and, these experiences she's going to have to go through in life, and all this stuff that was just going to really harden her and give her the kind of internal will to survive and emotional resiliency or inner strength and the ability to be alone with herself and support herself when no one else will in her life, right? Because she's got a powerful chart. Well, here's the story of Cyntoia Brown. She was 16 years old when she committed murder. Now, the motives for the murder she committed are disputed. Here's the important thing. She's been sentenced to 51 years in prison before she's eligible for release. Now, her story, and you can find it on the internet. I highly recommend taking a look for it because it's interesting reading. So Ms. Brown claims that she had been forced into prostitution at an early age, which investigators disputed due to lack of physical evidence, although honestly, I don't know what kind of physical evidence they'd be looking for underage prostitution. Brown further claims that she killed Alan, her victim, in self-defense, adding she feared she was likely to be murdered by him. And prosecutors argued that the physical evidence present at the crime scene suggested Alan was asleep at the time of the murder. So I don't know how familiar you guys are with victims of domestic violence. I've known a few women in my life who've been in those situations, and I knew one woman who was, I don't know, 5'1", soaking wet, 90 pounds. She was tiny. And she left a husband who was an officer in the Marines, and he was working in DC, so he was very high up there. So he was listen, military politics, there's just stuff they're going to get away with because all that stuff is held and investigated internally in the military. So she really didn't have any recourse as far as the physical violence and domestic abuse that was going on at home. And it was bad. And she was staying with him because she needed the medical insurance coverage for her autistic daughter at the time. She literally, like every domestic violence victim, she had nowhere she could go. She was kind of trapped at the moment. And at one point, the violence had gotten so bad, and she had reached her limit, and her husband was a big, strapping Marine officer. We're not talking a little 90-pound weakling guy, right? And you've got this little tiny 5'1" woman who's like 90 pounds, and she climbed up on his chest when he was asleep one night and pulled his, with his service knife and held it to his throat and waited for him to wake up. And when he did, she said, "Just remember, everybody's got to sleep sometime." So, I mean, that's a phenomenal story. It's a very dangerous one because, he literally could have snapped her neck, um, and called it self-defense. But the thing to understand is that in situations where there is that kind of imbalance of physical power or strength or defense, it's not uncommon for people to wait for the abuser to have a vulnerable moment before they attack. So it's not unthinkable that she would have attacked him in his sleep, especially if he was older, bigger, and more sophisticated in terms of abuse and physical violence than she was. So I don't, the whole thing about him being asleep or awake at the time of the murder, I don't know. This is like saying rape victims are only rape victims if they've got bruises and hair pulled and scratches on them. All right. By the time she was 16, Brown's encounters included many rapes and assaults during or before being raped and times when she was under the influence of drugs. Brown had a physically and sexually abusive pimp named, and I removed his name because we actually don't care what his name is, who brandished guns at her and forced her into prostitution. Brown was picked up by a 43-year-old real estate agent, Johnny Allen. Remember, she was 16 when this happened. 43-year-old man picking up a 16-year-old prostitute and taking to his house on August 6, 2004. Brown stated that for several weeks leading up to that day, she had been repeatedly raped and was on drugs. So, and for this, she's gotten a 51-year prison sentence before she's even eligible for release. And this is the chart of this person with that remarkable life story. Okay, so she is, in fact, the victim and the murderer. So now let's come over here, right? So this is our lovely Brock Turner. So if you're not familiar with Brock Turner, let me bring you up to speed. So there's Brock. All right, so Brock Turner was a 20-year-old Stanford University student athlete who was also a rapist. On March 30th, 2016, Turner was found guilty of 3 felonies: assault with intent to rape an intoxicated woman, sexually penetrating an intoxicated person with a foreign object, and sexually penetrating an unconscious person with a foreign object. So if you're not familiar with the story, Brock Turner apparently was at a party, a frat party I believe it was, but it was a college campus party. And there was a girl who was incredibly inebriated and had passed out on her way out of the house or in a room or I think she was actually passed out on the street no, I remember now. So there was a girl who was incredibly intoxicated. She was so intoxicated she passed out near a dumpster outside the house or the building when she was leaving. As she was laying on the ground, I don't remember if he pulled her back behind the dumpster out of the line of sight from people or if that's where he found her. But once he either followed her out or he came upon her, and out there in public, instead of getting help, Brock Turner proceeded to pull her pants down or remove her clothing from the waist down, and then proceeded to insert a bottle into her, digitally or stuck his fingers in her, and he was actually in the process of climbing on top of her to have sex with her out there on the ground next to a dumpster when 2 Swedish students happened to be walking by and thought something was wrong, and went over and then realized what was going on and intervened. And this is what resulted in Brock Turner's rape charges. Nice guy, huh? This is the guy, Mr. Charming, right? This is the guy with the easy life, right? This is the guy who's got no challenges. The only hard aspects in this kid's chart is a quincunx, an out-of-sign quincunx to Pluto, and that Moon-Mars conjunction in Libra, right? Mr. Charming, Mr., how can I get you to serve me and want to do this? Because it's always going to be about me. This Mr. Party Guy, right? Mr. Life of the Party, Mr. Everybody Loves Him, Mr. Charming. This is the guy who climbed up on top of an unconscious woman who was so drunk she passed out next to a dumpster and then proceeded to stick foreign objects in her, his fingers, and then tried to like climb on top of her after undressing her from the waist down, specifically to have sex with her next to a dumpster on the ground while she was passed out. Yeah. So, prosecutors recommended that Turner be given a 6-year prison sentence based on the purposefulness of the action, the effort to hide his activity, and her intoxicated state. He actually tried to say she wasn't that drunk. So his case is actually interesting to read as well. There's some really good stuff in there. The probation report did not mention, here's something interesting you guys need to know. The probation report did not mention another woman who said she had been upset by Turner's unwanted physical advances at a Kappa Alpha party 8 days before this charged offense. This report was present in the trial record. So remember, when we talk about serial rapists, we're not talking about boogeymen in the bushes that jump out and climb on top of complete strangers at 3 in the morning. Serial rapists literally means somebody who does it once and will continue doing it until they get caught because they got away with it the first time. And oftentimes with homicides, like serial homicides and serial anything, but certainly serial homicides and serial rape, they level up. So they practice everything up until they actually start is a practice run, right? It's like anything else. So his behavior in this case was not new. This is something he had been rehearsing before he got here. He just happened to have an opportunity. All right, so here's the most distressing thing here, and this is how this ties into this chart. On June 6th, remember, he has been recommended for a 6-year prison sentence for this. On June 2nd, 2016, the judge Aaron Persky sentenced Turner to 6 months. 6 months in the Santa Clara County Jail, followed by 3 years of probation. You know, and naturally being registered on the sex offenders registry list. So remember, this is the kid who, with this chart, is going to have a fairly easy life. And also, right here, Mr. Good Time, Mr. Party, Mr. Charming, he's always going to be very, very good at getting what he wants, right? People are going to want to do things for him and give him things. So he's going to have an easier life than other people because he's not going to have to work that hard at getting support for what he wants and what he needs. Certainly he'll have to make effort to make things happen, but he will have a lot more support and a lot more opportunities slid in his direction than other people will. So there's a lot of character development that will not occur in his lifetime unless he consciously and deliberately on his own chooses to pursue and participate in character building experiences, which, given the ease of this chart, he's not going to have a lot of desire to do because nobody is going to stop having a good time just to go suffer, right? Unless you're a bodybuilder, at which point the suffering is part of the pleasure. But that's a whole other conversation. So these are, and again, here's your rapist. All right, so let that sink in. And again, looking at this chart, like now looking back, so here's what I want you guys to know as a budding astrologers. Now looking back and knowing this information about these characters, and now looking at these charts, you can see how automatically, like, oh, right, of course, I can see it now. It's very easy to make a chart fit our expectations. Right? And I've seen people do some incredible intellectual gymnastics and contortion exercises to make astrology fit their biases and expectations based on what they know about the person. And it's really, really bad astrology. Amazing stuff. Amazing stuff. More justification, rationalization, and twisting and turning of information and make it fit than a fat person trying to get in a pair of spandex. All right, so there you go. So here is your astrologer's challenge for this month. And again, remember, this is not about being right or wrong. This is not about being able to go and do. I used to love the term witch hunt because it was very apropos, but it's so overused now. I get sick of, literally my stomach turns just hearing the word witch hunt. But in this particular instance, separate this from the person who's overused that term to death. This is a great exercise in reminding ourselves how we are capable of and how to avoid going on a witch hunt for suspected and possible future criminals based on their charts. Because remember, the other thing too is the difference between Centoya Brown, right, and Brock Turner is also circumstance and life opportunity. Okay, so Brock Turner came into a life, and we know this, it's all on record. I mean, that was very comfortable. So lots of support, lots of stability, lots of opportunities. There's absolutely no reason for this person to show a sociopathic behavior like sexual assault, except that his attitude and his sense of entitlement and his beliefs about women and his whole thinking about some women deserve respect, all the other women don't, and when women don't deserve respect, they get whatever they get that you decide to give them, right? These are all things that are conditions from the society he's grown up in and what he's been taught by his parents and reinforced by the people around him. So there is that, and we need to examine that and consider that when we're looking at charts and we're looking at the people in front of us. It doesn't matter what the chart promises us. The other half of what is going to create the manifestation of these potentials is going to be their life circumstances, right? And again, over here with Centoya Brown, she's got a remarkable chart, right? So we look at this stuff and we see some really challenging stuff in her chart. We're like, oh, yeah, of course, and I would be saying, of course, of course. But the thing to remember is that this is not about her being dealt a bad hand of cards. This is about her being given circumstances in which she's going to have to develop these tremendous internal, what is the word I'm looking for? These tremendous internal survival skills and these tremendous resources, these tremendous internal resources to be able to get through these circumstances. And also because there are outer planets involved, everything that she does, she gets no free pass on, right? So, and here, remember those words, right? Free pass. All right. This girl, right, with these horrible aspects, who has had a miserable life, right? Who at 16 was picked up by a 43-year-old man who was basically looking for an underage prostitute and was at his house for a week and was so out of her mind for whatever was going on, the drugs, the fear, or the not fear, whatever. Anyway, this all culminated in a murder charge. So there are serious mental and emotional health issues with this girl, and there are a lot of social services issues that should have been in her life implemented very early on. She was a runaway at 16 or 14, something like that. That could have prevented these circumstances from arising that led to this, but these things were not there because, obviously, one, she needed to go through some of these experiences, but also two, we've got a very broken system in terms of mental health and social services. So given the circumstances and opportunities that were made available to her throughout her lifetime, the thing to remember is that with all of that said, she did not get a free pass on anything. Okay, so for Centoya, no free pass. So everything up until this point, and even with a murder charge, 51 years before she's eligible for any type of release. 51 years, given her history and the circumstances that led to where she was in that moment. She wasn't, anyway, no free pass, right? Because of these hard aspects. So everything that she's going to go through is not only spotlighted, but she'll get no grace for it, right? Nobody will give her any leeway. This guy, on the other hand, this slimy, entitled piece of crap, right? Who knows how long he'd been getting away with forcing himself on people, and literally rolling over their objections because, hey, what? You want to do this for me because it's all about me. I'm such a charming guy, We don't know, but what we do know about rapists is that typically it is always a serial issue. If they got away with it once, they're going to keep doing it because there is a line that you cross when you start doing stuff like this and you start overstepping your boundaries into other people's physical spaces. And that doesn't stop unless someone makes you stop. Because if nobody ever tells you no, stop, like that's it, you can't cross this line, right? How do you know? You don't. You just keep going. So, and in this particular case, it's not about the individual saying to them, oh, no, no, please stop, Brock, please stop. And in this particular criminal case, she couldn't because she was unconscious. It's also about society saying, no, Brock, you can't do that. You can't act like that. We don't do that around here. So who knows how long Mr. Wonderful here had been getting away with this stuff, because remember all these lovely, beautiful aspects that makes his life so, so easy. So Brock, in fact, does get and did get and continues to get a free pass on a lot of things he probably shouldn't. Okay? So this is a different way of looking at a chart, and this is usually a lot more useful. If you're going to get into any type of work where you are talking to people about themselves, or God forbid, other people that they know that are not in the room to object or counter anything you're saying, it's important that we approach these charts with the right mentality, and also we approach human lives with the right attitude. And we always, always, always put the realities of circumstance, opportunity, and social conditioning, right? The environment in the context of the reading. Because it doesn't matter if your chart says that you're meant to make a ton of money, right? Listen, if you are meant to make a ton of money, be super wealthy, and you are like Tesla, right? Or not Tesla, the guy who runs Tesla, right? His father was an engineer. His father was wealthy, so he had the best opportunities for education. He had a father who could teach him a lot about engineering before he ever went to engineering school. Of course, he had a much better set of advantages. And lucky for him and the rest of us, he took advantage of those things and did something good with it, as opposed to resting on his wealthy laurels and just being a useless playboy who thinks everybody's here to service him. On the other hand, if you had grown up in circumstances like Centoya Brown had grown up in, right, which led to being a runaway at a very early age, and you're under 18, where are you going to work, right? Nobody's going to hire you. So, and then of course, you're very vulnerable and exposed to the predatory advances of pimps, right, and becoming an underage prostitute because you got to eat. And pimps are going to put you to work whether you want to work or not. So, in those situations, sure, she could have made a lot of money doing that too, but it was money that was not earned in ways that we necessarily approve of or would sanction. So the chart might tell us we're going to make a lot of money. It doesn't necessarily tell us how we're going to make that money, or what kind of person we're going to become in the process of making that money, or whatever else we're seeing in the chart, because our character is built on our experiences and our responses to it. So what Brock Turner's chart is a classic, perfect example that your character is not defined by your chart. Your chart will tell you a lot of stuff, but your character, your integrity, your ethics, your level of responsibility to other people, your chart won't tell you that. That's something that is developed or not developed, as the case may be, in the case of Mr. Brock Turner. All right, folks, so those are your answers to this month's Astrologer Challenge. I hope you enjoyed this. And again, if you have some time, go look up these cases. They're fascinating stuff. They're very good reading. And then, of course, you can always go back and read up on the aspects as well. But remember, we have to put these charts in the context of human lives and real life circumstances. And we need to be very mindful of the words we use when we describe the potentials we're seeing, because we can be incredibly damning and condemning unnecessarily with people who don't deserve it. Because the reality is with hard aspects, especially outer planet aspects like this, compared to this, which is one big piece of apple pie, right? People with hard aspects in their chart like this, with outer planets in particular, there's a lot of misapplication of some interesting tidbits about those planets and how they interact in the chart. Ultimately, this is about personal development. And if you're not able to see the positive side of these things and focus on what good can come out of this, then you shouldn't be counseling this person or talking about those aspects with that person. Because people will, more often than not, become what you expect or believe them to be. So expect and believe that they're capable of being better, and that there's a better, higher purpose for these experiences that we're seeing mapped out in a chart that are less than ideal, and give them something to rise to and believe in. All right. So we will see you guys next month with January horoscopes. I'm working on the 2019 scopes. They may be out a little bit later, so maybe at the end of the first week of January. Bear with me. I got a bunch of stuff going on this week with the holidays. If you enjoyed this, please support my efforts by liking and subscribing and sharing. Um, it will cost you nothing to do that, and it means a lot to me, and it helps the channel immensely so I can keep working on producing better quality content for those of you who are serious about your astrology. And also, if you have some time, truck on over to my Patreon page, patreon.com, Primal Girl Wellness. I'll put a link down below. And I've got some free content on here that's always worth looking forward to. And for those of you who want access to the subscriber exclusives, there is some really great content there for $2 a month, which is $12 a year, $24 a year, $12 a year, $1 a month. Oh my God, I don't even know. 2 cups of coffee a year. You get access to a whole lot more than just these videos as they come out monthly. And also this month, just so you guys know, up until probably the end of January, we're running some promotional specials for Patreon subscribers. So readings on demand that you can use for yourself or give away as a gift to other people. $50. $50. Can't beat that with a stick. All right, so you guys have an amazing holiday. And remember, practice your astrology responsibly and from the heart with a lot of confidence and belief in people that they are meant for bigger, better things. And these experiences make them stronger, more resilient, and more amazing. And we'll talk to you later. Bye.